So this shouldn't be a huge surprise to a lot of people, but newsflash. Modern is the most expensive than it has ever been before. Saffron Olive responds to a Reddit post. Saw a Reddit post about how it's not really true that Modern is more expensive now than it was in the past. Looking at the data, this is just flat out objectively wrong. So we've seen, actually, I mean, it goes up and down over time, but especially in the year of 2021, you go boom! The average price of a Modern deck is like at least of the top 12 decks, you know. I mean, if you take the whole, I think even if you took all the Modern decks of like 2021, it's still going to be way more expensive than ever in the past. Just because so many of them need to be playing with some sort of Modern Horizon cards, whether it comes from Modern Horizons 1 or 2. Just pushing the price of cards up. So, yeah. But you know what? They keep saying Modern is inaccessible. It's so hard to get into the format. Yeah, that's true for some people. There's a lot of people still playing it. You scrounge around for the cards. You got to sell some stuff from your commander deck. You borrow. You scrap together an archetype from borrowing from all your friends. People are still making you do it. Still making you do it. Now, my first question was, is it still the most expensive, even with inflation? And I don't know if that answer was sufficiently figured out, but Saffron Olive does address it. If you add 3% inflation per year, which is shooting high, but is like sort of the average over time, considering 2.61% was the rate over the past 10 years. Yeah, but what was the rate over the last 2 years? This is the real question. Decks today are still considerably more expensive than they were in the past. The huge jump from 2022 to 2021 is especially jarring. But like this obviously is like 2020 is not really representative of the history of Modern. I feel like it's really, we should just be looking at the trend going upwards like this. And he does address why it was so cheap in 2020, thanks to largely M. Hayashi piloting the Abosh deck. The Abosh deck was a big deal. Where does he mention this? Do I have to go back one? What were the key factors in 2020 to drive prices that low? It was partly the meta at the time. Abosh Red was the top tier deck at $238. You hear that, M. Hayashi? You are actually the budget master. You've been playing competitive budget decks the entire time. The entire time. The shocking thing is that the 2021 bar is only showing the price of one. It's just showing the price of one Ragavan. Anyway, there you go. Love it or hate it, Modern is definitely more expensive now. Everything's more expensive. All the Modern, like every single deck, especially the top 12 decks, is just basically Modern Horizons 2 archetypes. So you know, it's really not that far to say that Modern is like Modern Horizons block, the format, more or less. Anyway, welcome everyone to Coffee and MTG. I'm Nikachu, the Merfolk Master. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So let's have a great morning this morning, especially with our sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com. Still with this giant Xmas sale, up to 50% off hundreds of items. You'd have to check them out at FusionGamingOnline.com. But if nothing else, you can buy those really expensive Modern cards you've been looking for. Excellent stocking stuffers. But when you do it at Fusion Gaming Online, you get a discount. Whoops! So you get the discount, 5% off all your purchases when you use coupon code Nikachu at checkout. But we're also going to thank Mana Traders, the premier place to rent Magic cards online. So you don't have to buy the suit. I mean, it can actually get pricey online, but when you rent, you can basically mostly rent most of the archetypes with their rental services. So you don't have to buy into any of the archetypes. You borrow them, and if you want to play a new one, you just trade it back in for another one. You can support the channel using my Mana Traders link in the description below, or save 15% off your first 2 months using coupon code Nikachu. All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, James. Good morning, Lord Magicus, Mikey J, Dr. Glass Bottle, Andrew, Gold Medals. Good morning, Frederick, Benji Boy, Kebby G, Christopher, Marcel, Mareep, Good morning, Mitch. Good morning, Dungeon. Part of his Bidenflation. I don't think it's particularly Biden's fault. There's a lot of inflation happening for many reasons. I saw one video about it. It's like there's no one reason. You could count the factor of printing a lot of money for one reason, but then there's supply chain problems, and he addressed like a million of different other problems. Inflation's coming from all angles. Good morning, Norman. Good morning, Salai. Pandemic tank card prices. Do you know what? That's actually, it's hard to remember that. Back in, let's get back to that graph. The pandemic did do that temporarily. So there was a point where pandemic happens, like all prices go down. Then money printer go burr and prices shoot right back up. I mean, everyone was buying everything. At first, nobody wanted any cards. Everyone's trying to sell their cards. And then all of a sudden, no, we want the cards back. In fact, we want more cards than what we sold. What a weird time. What a weird time. No demand if no one plays except it's a weird thing. I mean, I think a lot of people are buying cards even though they're not playing. I mean, I bought a lot of paper cards and I'm not playing with the cards. Barely. I got to play with my Sveloons once at MTG Las Vegas. That's about it. First Doys, while still being present in Burn, I feel Bolt is losing its grip in Modern. Do you think it's finally getting power creeped out, or will it return with a meta shift? I think its main purpose is to just throw itself at your opponent for the most part. I mean, yeah, you could shoot things, but I think it's still relevant. Hits Ragavan, hits the Dragon Rage Chandler, hits some Mana Dorks. I still think it has a place in Modern. It's definitely, there's a lot less targets for it now, that's for sure. Or when it does have a target, it's pointless. Yeah, okay, shoot the Solitude. Probably already got value already. So anyway, you know the drill, guys. 3 question marks before the question, 3 question marks after the question. Helps me find your questions amongst all the comments I'm getting on my social media channels. But if you are on, YouTube, you can donate with Super Chats and your question gets pushed to the top of my feed. KBG, is the inflation caused by people buying back in after COVID? Looks like 2020 was a sell year. I don't think the demand might have been created after COVID, after, people were, given free money. But I don't know if that created... I mean, I wouldn't call that do we call that inflation when there's just so much demand? I think that it's just legitimate demand. What's going on here? So I wouldn't consider the rise in prices due to inflation. Or sorry, how do I put it? How do we look at this? Trying to dig back into my economic, there's definitely inflation in Magic, 100%, but I don't know if you can consider that the demand portion, if you can call the demand for Magic cards part of that inflation. But I guess so. Okay, what about Boomer Jun? That was always 2K. Well, that was the outlier, That was the outlier. There's always an extremely expensive deck in Modern. Right now it's like the Elemental Soup deck. In the past it was Boomer Jund. Mikey J says all collectibles went up during the pandemic and now things are starting to get back to some semblance of normal in the collectibles market. Alejandro says we might have recorded paper Magic gameplays. Would be nice. There's no coverage anymore. We might have recorded... Is this a question or a statement? The Emerald Boy. Good morning, Nikachu. Yesterday, I lost to Tron with Temur, Blood Moon, Rhinos, and I found the card I cut in the 75 that could have saved the game. Subtlety. I immediately bought a playset of that card after that. Yesterday, I lost to Tron with Temur, Blood Moon, How did Tron I lost to Tron with Teamer Blood Moon Rhinos. Emerald. I don't make it. I don't. This whole sentence doesn't make any sense. You lost to Tron that was playing with Blood Moon and the Rhinos package in all at once, and you think subtlety can help beat it? Sorry, doesn't this just flies right over my head. None of it makes sense. Lee Joyner, hey Nikachu, in Merfolk, when is it appropriate to cut Ether Vial from the deck while sideboarding? Any matchups you cut all of them out? Yes, I mean, generally speaking, against any Thoughtseize deck, you want to cut the card. Any of those attrition-based decks, because you do not want these mana sources screwing you over. The idea is to make your deck more threat dense. There are some matchups where I like to take it out on the play and bring it back in on the draw, because on the play, I'm down a card, right? I start the game. It's essentially, if no one mulligans, you start the game with 7 cards on the play, your opponent starts with 8. So I definitely don't want Ether Vial on the play, but on the draw, maybe I need to come back versus that deck. Like, maybe I need the tempo. I'm scared of getting tempoed out, even though, you know, attrition is also a factor, so I might keep them in on the draw. So, like, if it's an attrition-based deck, but you feel like you're going to get tempoed out, you can bring them back in on the draw. Like, right now, I'd be taking it out versus, like, I just take them all out versus Death Shadow, versus any of those Ragavan decks. Maybe not every Ragavan deck. I don't think I would take it out versus Murktide. Yes, the stimulus. Well, I mean, the stimulus money is one gigantic factor to inflation. Magic 8's made a 3,500 Modern deck with 36 Modern Horizons 1, Modern Horizons 2 cards. Basically, Modern Horizons the deck. Oh, he was playing Rhinos. I lost. Oh, I see. I lost to Tron. Piloting. Oh, sorry, you were piloting a Teamer Blood Moon Rhinos, and I found the card in the 75 that could have saved the game. So you wanted Subtlety, what, versus their, I'm guessing, Ulamog? But it still gets the trigger. Otherwise, I don't know what's a... I mean, you could also hit Wormcoil Engine, I guess. Alright. Thank you very much for... Thank you very much for solving that for me. I'm sure he phrased it fine. I'm still waking up this morning. Gotcha. I'm still surprised, though, that would matter. And why would you have so much trouble versus Tron? I mean, I guess Wormcoil Engine is a problem. Ken Phillips, is Aetherworks Marvel still viable in Modern? I'm thinking of making a Modern deck, and I love that deck in my home format Pioneer. It's unplayable in Modern. It's just unplayable. The problem with Aetherworks Marvel is you need to play with all those weird energy cards, like... Oh, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, because they're unplayable. They're just strictly, they're too clunky, they're unplayable. Oh, and by the way, there's a ton of artifact hate in Modern. Do not expect this Aetherworks Marvel to exist for very long. But anyway, it's, yeah, it's not a good deck. Sorry, don't buy into any of the Modern upgrades to make it work. I love giving people hope, but there's no hope here. People have tried it, and the main thing is that you need to play with those energy cards, right? And they're just poop. They're just poop in this format. Any chance we add back Chalice? No, not really. It's so hard to protect Chalice, and it's pointless. They have your opponents have Prismatic Ending, or too many ways around it, or just a curve. Mikey J, can you give me some tips on when to stop playing Merfolk conservatively and just go YOLO? I feel like I hold back in a few too many spots when I should go for it. In any matchup, there are some matchups where you just have to go for more or less just goldfish for as quick of a win as possible. Here's a good one. Any matchup that you know you always lose the long game. So if the game goes too long, you always lose. You can never control the game. You're getting out controlled in the long game. You should just put the fastest clock possible and then just win. I can imagine something happening like this versus like Lantern control, especially if I don't have any counter spells in hand. But even that, like, it doesn't matter. Even if I have counter spells in hand, it's almost never appropriate to like hold it up for an Ensnaring Bridge. It's just best to hope that they can't lock you out in 4 turns. It was a question if we can have some paper magic gameplays. I have no paper magic gameplays planned. Not setting anything up. Spencer Ward, good morning. I started brewing my next deck. What would you think of Lazotep Chancellor in Dimir 8 rack? Lazo. What is it? It's Lazotep Chancellor. Whenever you discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, amass 2. It's whenever you discard a card, not your opponent, though. So this looks unplayable. Like, you need to discard. Like, what, you want to target yourself with this card? I don't know if that's how you want. I don't know if that's the strategy in Dimir 8 rack. So I think I would not play this card. Unless there's some bigger picture that I'm missing here. Whenever you discard a card, you may pay 1. So, like, I guess if you have Liliana the Veil, you could get some synergy off this. But you might as well just play some larger bomb. Like, why work hard for your value when you can just play some creature that will probably just win by itself? Like, in my mind, even Murktide Regent probably is not too bad of a card in 8 rack. Because you're putting a bunch of stuff in the graveyard anyway. As long as you're not playing with Ensnaring Bridge. Which I'm not in love with for the most part anyway. Hello, is black-green food still viable in Modern? It is! It is! It's not as popular as it was before, but that kitchen deck is still great. It's still a fantastic deck, and there's still a lot of room to innovate that archetype. 100%. Can you make an enchantment or a curse tier list? No. There's just not that many good, like, it would be a short list. I mean, I could make a list. It's like, this one is B tier, this one, and then the rest of them are all like E tier or something like that. They'd be all terrible. Because they're not, overall, they're not that good. They're very, very niche. Some of them are really strong if you can pull them off, but they're still very expensive. They're very, very expensive curses. Zenek, do you like playing Merfolk partly because it's an underdog? No, the underdog has nothing to do with it. Sadly, and I know a lot of people like to bring this up, they like the idea of Merfolk catching people off guard. Surprise value. No one's expecting the Merfolk, but that it almost is never relevant because by default, the creatures just die to removal. Die to removal, die to sweepers, and lo and behold, guess what? Everyone has that in Modern. Everyone has removal, everyone has sweepers, so I mean, like, even if you catch someone, like, even if it's, people are not expecting Merfolk, everyone's deck is already built to interact with Merfolk in general, so. The only exception being maybe against certain combo decks, they may not expect a creature-based deck with so much counter magic. That'd be the only time that I think Merfolk could get the upper hand, get some surprise value. Counterspell versus Archmage's Charm. Counterspell is just superior, except that Archmage's Charm can steal 1 mana permanence and 0 mana permanence, which I think interacts very well in the metagame right now. Wet Willie, do you think that Modern will ever get less expensive again, or should I buy into Modern Horizons 2 cards now before they snowball worse? I think in general, the cards will get cheaper in the future, but it depends how long you gotta wait. I mean, you might be waiting years. Let's go back to the graph. You know. So, like, let's say someone thought it was pretty expensive at 789, then it got more expensive at 908, then it got more expensive at 1038. Then it collapsed. And by the way, this only collapsed because of Bosch. Bosch brought the average down. But, I can see Modern getting less expensive with some reprint sets, and maybe a shift in the metagame where a slightly cheaper deck gets better. But like if you want to talk about specifically Modern Horizons 2 cards, they will most definitely get more expensive before they get cheaper. What's the shortest turnaround on reprinting new cards? Like, look how long it took them to reprint Force of Negation. So let's look at Force of Negation. So I could see modern modern getting cheaper overall if you wait. Oh, look at that! It actually went down by quite a bit. Maybe because a lot of people are moving away from blue decks, or maybe the reprint actually helped. You take a look at there. Force negation not so hot anymore. This was really expensive at one point. But I mean, that was like, how do I put it? Looking at things like Solitude, Fury, Urza Saga and stuff is like looking at Modern Horizons here. And, you know, Force Negation was $43 and was pretty expensive for people. And they're like, oh, I don't want to spend $43 on this. And then over time, it just ballooned. I don't know, but I don't know what the answer is to your situation, whether you buy this thing or not. But I don't see the Modern Horizons 2 cards getting all that much cheaper from here. A lot of people are in your same spot. They're like, do I buy now or do I buy later? So there is a lot of people with like, they're waiting to see if they should buy. Not really waiting to see if they should sell. Albert, in a mono white taxes list, how many white sources should I run? And how many land destruction lands can I run? You can run all 8. I've seen all 8 being played. I don't support Leonin Arbiter, which means you shouldn't be playing that many, what's it called, Leonin Arbiters. Sorry, Ghost Quarters. Yeah, you shouldn't be running too many of either of those. But if you're running the package, then go for it. But here's the thing, like, so I'm guessing the question is, can I run so many of these colorless sources when I need white mana sources in my deck? Well, first off, I think most of the Death and Taxes lists play like 23 lands. They play some number of Horizon lands. Let's go look at a Death and Taxes list. But I think there's 2 things that helps your mana. First, Field of Ruin, before I even look at the lists. Field of Ruin fixes your mana, right? Because you get to play with Field of Ruin. You pitch the Field of Ruin, you hit the land, you get your white mana source. You can Ghost Quarter yourself if you really, really need to. I think Death and Taxes lists on average play 22, 23 mana, like lands. And they play 4 Ether Vial, so. Now, with those predictions locked in, how good is Nikachu's memory of Death and Taxes? Am I right or am I completely dead wrong? Oh god, how far has Death and Taxes fallen down? Oh shit. Damn it, I forgot there's so many Yorion in Taxes. The number of lands is going to be like pushed up by quite... Oh, is this a 60 card deck? I think this is a 60 card deck. No Yorion. Okay. 20 lands? Is there any creatures that turn into lands here? Okay, I'm just dead wrong. I've seen a lot of lists, though, play like 22 lands if necessary. This list is... This is actually an unusual list. It's not playing... It's playing like Mutavault. It's not even playing, what's it called? Field of Ruin. Okay, what's this? See, 22. Okay, there we go. 22 lands. But is this a Yorion list? No. Okay, so this is a little bit more familiar looking to me. This is like a very standard looking Death and Taxes list. Very, very standard. Too standard. Me? No, okay, forget it. That's Mishra's Factory all of a sudden. Whatever, looks like you could do whatever you want. It's funny, this one play... You know what, if you're only playing Mutavault, there's no point in playing just Mutavault. You might as well play with Mishra's Factory. First Doise asks if... Sorry if I asked this already. Is Tron viable? I think Flicker plus Pneumatic Wall and Subtlety can create a lot of advantage. I don't know. I mean, it'll depend. I have to see the list first, Doise. This is just like a random idea. How does Death and Taxes win? Great question. You play creatures, you attack with them, you deal damage, then you rinse and repeat this process until your opponent's life total goes from 20 to 0. Very, very difficult way to win the game. Perhaps the hardest way to win the game, but that's how they do it. And believe it or not, it actually can happen. Is there any way that Torment of Hailfire could make it into Modern? Any big mana strategy? I guess you would have to, if you threw this into a Tron deck. It's the only way I could think it could work. Torment of... This is the only way I think this card could work, is if you threw it into a Tron deck. And then at that point, like, it's just like a janky way to win, because probably there's another way you can win if you have also all the mana up. So I mean, some sort of black. I would imagine a black-green Tron deck. If you really wanted to make this card work, throw it into black-green Tron. So you have like X, black, X. Repeat the following processes X times. Each opponent loses 3 life, unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. Lee Joyner, what are your thoughts on Rishadan Dockhand in Merfolk? There were 2 recent 5/0s that ran a playset of them. Honestly, I think it's crap. I think it's absolute crap. It's not very powerful, and then when you try to if you're tapping down your opponent's lands, you're also tapping down your own lands, because you have to pay a mana to tap this thing. And what that ends up doing is it slows you down. So if you have a hand with Aether Vial, it's not too bad, even though that will be a little bit slow too. But the point is, it's just it slows your opponent down, but it slows you down at the same time. And I think the advantage is more or less a wash, except you've got this random creature on the battlefield that can be a liability, because it's just a weak creature in general. Like in the late game, it's not very good. Not to say that Merfolk is bad, but I'm not a believer of this card. I would have to see it in action. Maybe I have to see its power fully utilized. The only good thing about it right now, I think, is let's bring up Rishadan Dockhand. The only good thing about Rishadan Dockhand right now is its interaction with Inkmoth Nexus, and there's a few of those in the format, especially in Hammer Time. So shutting down Inkmoth is a big deal. But that's about it. How many decks in Modern can use Vicious Rumors? Deals 1 damage for 1 black, deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, and you gain 1 life. I mean, any deck that plays black could, in theory, play this. But I wouldn't say it's good, because they get to discard what they discard. And of course, they're going to discard something that helps them. That's how they're going to do it. The Weirdly Friendly Mushroom. Hey, Nikachu, do you think there's any way to make a graveyard artifact deck with Mirrodin Besiege work? I think I know what this card is. As Mirrodin Besiege enters the battlefield, choose Mirren or Phyrexian. Mirren, whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. Phyrexian, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. I actually think this very much can be a win condition in some sort of deck. 100%. Hell, maybe there's a self-mill deck that does this. Maybe there's a self-mill deck where you play like Mirrodin Besieged and you self-mill yourself into victory. But then again, okay, that's awkward because you have to self-mill yourself, but you need enough artifacts. I guess the deal is you just play an artifact deck. But this very underutilized card for sure. There's probably some deck that could use this. But I wouldn't say it's... So here's how I would put it. I wouldn't call it a graveyard artifact deck. You should just play an artifact deck, and then worst case scenario, if things go into the graveyard, like you crack stuff, it happens. You play Emery dumps some stuff in your graveyard. You can incidentally win the game, but that should not be the main... I would say the main focus should not be to win the game via the graveyard. You just try to win the game through normal means, Emery, Urza, all that good stuff, because there's another mode on this anyway that you can play. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. That's very good. It's very strong. I mean, you could play this, play Mox Amber, and boom, you got some value out of it. But definitely is a playable card. Just completely ignored. Yeah, hashtag not financial advice. If I ever give it financial advice on this morning show, it's not financial advice. Thoughts on Dakin Shadowslayer in a Stoneforge Mystic list? Some people have tried it. I mean, your main problem is you're forced into Esper, which is like maybe not ideal. I mean, whatever, it's possible, but it's not the flavor of Stoneforge Mystic right now. Stoneblade ideally is just Azorius, if anything. And it's like, it's whatever. I think most of the time it's just like 3 mana, exile like a permanent. I guess the biggest problem is that there's no insanely great synergy with this and a Stoneblade deck. Like, this is a fine playable card by itself, but it doesn't really have any great synergy with Stoneforge Mystic. Like, the whole point of Stoneforge Mystic is put your artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield anyway. Maybe, and like getting to, oh no, well, getting to 6 maybe not so difficult. I guess in the event that you're stranded with a Cauldron complete, this might be your best way to get it back in play, but like, I don't think Stoneblade decks don't have worse things to worry about. So the card is like okay, but nothing amazing. Is Aven Mind Sensor good in Martyr Proc? Is it good in Martyr Proc? Why would it? Everyone's asking about cards and decks. I mean, you can put it in there, but I wouldn't say it's a good card in Martyr Proc. Like, the Martyr Proc deck is trying to control the game with, like, more or less life gain. So I don't see how this can be a good sideboard card in the right matchup, sure. But they're not trying to lock the opponent out via, like, you know, locking their fetch lands. The Martyr Proc's not really it's not Ponza deck, you know? I saw a $1,500 vintage list that's running for Ragavan. We should see how inflation has affected vintage. I should ask Saffron Olive. All right, you did this for modern. You did the prices for modern. Now please do the prices for vintage. What's the average price? What's the average cost of a vintage deck? What about Black Ramp and Cabal Coffers? Cabal Coffers is a completely unplayable card in modern. Strictly unplayable. I saw it was coming out at Mythic. I knew this was just sheer garbage. You would really have to show me what deck this would go in to get a good payoff. Pay 2, tap, add black for each swamp you control. Even if you have Urborg out, that's like 3 mana on turn 3. Like, what turn do you... So it's like, by turn 6, you can add like a bunch of mana. But like, then what do you... You might as well be playing Tron. You might as well be playing Tron. Jay Tello, I have heard talk about unbanning certain cards in Modern. Is there any cards you think should come off the ban list? Yes, the Artifact lands and Umezawa's Jite. We are starting to run low on cards to unban, though. And I have no problem with the cantrips being unbanned. But maybe they'll stay banned because they'll say, oh, Faithless Looting's broken, so the rest of them are... Ugh. There's a lot of arguments to be made to keep them on the ban list. I just don't think they hold any weight. How's everyone like the new Coffee and MTG music? I had this in my mind for like 6 months, and I just recently got it all set up. It's like mostly Animal Crossing's music. And the tracks go on for like 15-ish minutes. I don't know if 15 minutes is too long. Maybe 10 minutes was the sweet spot, but the thing is, if it's 10 minutes, then maybe these songs would loop too much. Mitch loves the music. Well, the thing is, no, well, can Phyrexian Ablator use this? Okay, so by turn 3, you have 3 mana. Turn 4, you have 5 mana, but... No, do you even have 5? If you have Urborg, you have 5 mana. But even then, you have 4 lands in play, so you can just cast the Phyrexian Obliterator. Problem solved. Brandon, thank you very much. Yes, I reached 50,000 subs on the main channel. Partially segregating this channel away from it. Can't hear the music more than half the time anyway. I hope it's clear. I'll have to hear on the replay how clear the music was. Or is. Some vintage decks got a little pricier because of Urza's Saga, Ragavan, and a couple. It's funny that it's those are the cards that help push the prices of the vintage decks. I doubt it. Like, come on. Like, what is it going to push it up by like $2,000 at most? Like those. Have you seen it with the price? Let's go take a look at some vintage decks. I mean, yeah, technically it got a little bit more expensive because Modern Horizons 2, but like that's definitely not the needle. Where am I? Decks, popular decks. We're gonna go to vintage. Go straight to vintage. How expensive can these decks get? Look, $92,000. It got $2,000 more expensive because of Modern Horizons. But like, I think also this deck probably got more expensive just because, like, you know, Mox Ruby probably got more expensive. Mox Sapphire is worth less than Mox Ruby? What the hell? Oh, people can't see what I'm showing. Look at this. Mox Sapphire at 8,000, 8,500. Is that Mox Sapphire is actually one of the cheaper ones? What is going on here? Get your Mox Sapphires, people. Pithing Needle, still good. $1. Manifold Key, 80 cents. Probably felt good on the wallet after spending a house worth of cards on your vintage deck. Is anyone really buying into vintage right now? Like, does anyone say, I want to have a vintage deck, I'm going to spend 100 grand on it? I don't think so. I think anyone who bought into vintage bought into it like 10 years ago. Maybe 6 years ago. I would think the drastic increase in cryptocurrency prices last year had more to do with vintage prices than the Monkey and Urza Saga did. Yes. I would agree. Why are people looking only at top 12 decks when there are many other viable decks? MTG Holic, that is a great question. And the answer to that is, people don't like to play the other viable decks. They all think that they deserve to play the top tier 1 deck of the format. So if it's the best deck, they must play that deck. I want to play the deck that costs $1,500. It's using the cards I want to play. Isn't that funny? Like, people... I mean, I can't tell if people want to play the decks that are the most expensive or people want to play the decks that are good. Because there are certainly a lot of really good decks that are cheap. But they just... people, for some reason, they just want it. They gravitate to the most expensive cards. People want free wins? Yes, people want free wins as well. I mean, in general, the top decks are correlated with winning. In general. So... Seabass already missing the banjo music. Banjo music. That banjo music was very polarizing. The Banjo-Kazooie music. It was a super polarizing music. Like, some people, you either loved it or you hated it. I loved it. To be honest, I thought it was getting a bit repetitive at this point, but I loved it. Neo Geno. Check what printing they have in that list for the Mox. It's probably a Beta Sapphire and an Unlimited Ruby. I mean, I'm not going to look that up. But I get what you're saying. Ventric, I finished... Well, you're one of very few people that would have done this. I finished my vintage deck this year, but something I've been wanting to do for forever and was in the financial position to do so. Congratulations, you can own a vintage deck. Get your Mox Rubies, increase the price and sell. I need to make a video about my Tidebinder mages. If magic was cryptocurrency, look, people, there's a new stock on the horizon. That is Tidebinder Mage. This thing is going to the moon. Right now, you could get in. It's super cheap at like 2 to 3 cents, and we're going straight to $1, baby. I'm just gonna watch all the cryptocurrency like videos, and then eventually I'll have enough material to make my own Tidebinder Mage one. We'll see if we can move the price too. Everyone buy into this thing. The hardest part is dumping the cards, though. Does Svelun replace Lord of Atlantis? Actually, no. It's Counterspells replace Lord of Atlantis. Lord of Atlantis is still good. Lord of Atlantis is still good. I remember Sultai Infect winning an RNG. Did it? Did it do that as well? Because it made top 8 in a at MTG Las Vegas, but then I heard from someone else that it won the RNG series, but I don't know if it actually did. Okay, hold on. Maybe we've got results here. Is there any RNG? Wow, look at, oh no, it won a trial. Or is that the whole tournament? Oh, I guess this had to have been the whole tournament. Oh, look at that. First place, Sultai Infect again. Was it the same Sultai Infect deck? Did it go back to... It went back to back, baby! Is it the same guy? Oh no, this is a username online. Incredible. That is just incredible. Same crap. Just blue for basically for Blighted Age and I guess some Spell Pierces. It's the most awkward splash of all time, but I guess it works. I guess it just works. Is Drazitron an underrated deck? No. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say I don't know this for sure, but I'm gonna assume it has trouble versus the Elemental deck. I think Drazitron is probably not happy about playing against decks that, like, between Fury and Solitude. I mean, they got some good free answers, and enough of the decks are chonky that maybe it gets around Drazitron. Now that being said, I think Drazitron does have a good position in the metagame because of Chalice of the Void, and also the fact like Chalice interacts very well at 1 mana and 0 mana in the format. But I wouldn't say it's a completely like how do I put it? Let's look at the decks. Look at the decks in Modern. It might have a good position versus Hammer Time. Might not. Hammer Time might actually just be too fast in some cases for the Eldrazi deck. Probably is good versus Murktide Regent. Probably is not good versus Blink. Probably is fine versus Death Shadow. Very good versus Burn. Azorius Control. I think Azorius Control probably has enough interaction now that they don't care about Eldrazi anymore. Amulet Titan crushes them. Crashing Footfalls, probably they're in good shape versus Crashing Footfalls. Probably they're in good shape versus Jund. I don't know about Rakdos midrange. Midrange is a little bit different. Probably not doing that great versus Yawgmoth. Or maybe they are. I don't know how well their Pithing Needle and Sorcerer's Spyglass will interact in this matchup. 5-color Omnath, probably not doing very well. Not doing that great versus Mono Green Tron. So it's like, it's got good matchups, but it's got bad matchups. So, like, it's playable, but I wouldn't say it's underrated. It has been very underrated in the past. How's Pioneer in the US and Canada? Do you still play it? No. How's it doing? Overall, I don't know. Ask your local game store for more details. Do you guys play Pioneer? Well, no. I heard some people are playing Pioneer, but like I don't think it's overall that it's not the most popular format at the moment. Moondoggy. That's bull. You can't look at the top decks and not think that they output more value than other decks. For the most part, I mean, people do gravitate to these decks because they are winning more often. But not always. Like, take a look at Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth was a very, very good deck, sitting, like, way low in the metagame for a very long time like, this deck was already pretty good even before Modern Horizons 2 came out, and then it still was very relevant after Modern Horizons 2 came out. And finally, it's now broke the top 10? No, 12. It's finally in the top 12, but still underrated. Like, Reed Duke, I think, got 12th place at MTG Las Vegas with this deck. Like, it got his seal of approval. That's how good that deck is. And it's still, like, undervalued. So just because it's not at the top doesn't mean it's not, like, one of the best decks. It can be a difficult deck to play, and I would say the decks that are really good but are difficult to play do end up, lower in the ranks because people aren't winning with them. And that's another thing. Like, Murktide, I think, is a good deck, but I think its meta share is largely contributed to the fact that this is a relatively easy deck to pick up, pilot, and get value with. And then depending how good of a player you are, it can be better or worse. Nikachu, what's the best Death and Taxes list? I don't know. As far as I know, Death and Taxes is not... I would say I would go with the Yorion list. I would. Death and Taxes gets a lot of value out of Yorion. I mean, they've got a lot of ETB, so why not play Yorion? Doesn't make any sense to not play Yorion, in my opinion. In my opinion. Oh my god, the time is flying. Time flew too much. Ugh. It has a delay. I don't like that. It's okay. Okay, it's time for Decklist review. Oh my god, there's so many more questions. My local game store has so much demand for Modern that they now have 2x Modern events a week. That's why Modern is the best format. And yes, Pioneer needs to be added to Arena. This is very overdue. Do you think we'll see more tribal support for the more obscure tribes? No. If no, which is more likely? No, I just don't think we're gonna... Wizards just doesn't focus on tribes. They don't really care. They just don't care. They just gave squirrels something. Where was that question? Where the hell is that question? Rats, squirrel. They just gave squirrels support. That's it. You blew your load. If you can't make a deck out of the Modern Horizons 2 cards, you're not gonna get shit for another 10 years. I mean, you just got it. Like, they don't... When they support, they just... Like, they print cards, but it's not really support. So we might see some rat stuff in Neon Dynasty, but then that's it. And if you don't get what you want, wait another 10 years for something. Wait another 10 years, basically. Ah, James Gilberto here for the Facebook crew. Alright, let's look at some deck lists. You all in your wonderful deck lists. T. Siddons, 327. You got a general first reinforcement stack, apparently. Is Packrat still viable? I think this is actually a real card. But I don't know if it's good now. I think it had its moments at some point in Modern. Like, it was underrated, but it's really hard for... It's really hard to see this card being good now. Alright, what do we got here? We have a mana base of cards. Dread Militant. Ignoble Hierarch. One Ragavan, which is weird. Wild Cantor. Sacrifice. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Burning Tree Emissary. Hero of Precinct 1. Voice of Resurgence. Boros. Okay, so you have the general first Recurric here. Boros Charm, Lightning Helix, Metamorphose, 1 Ren. Is this like a budget? I can't imagine you playing this deck with only 1 Ren. Prismatic Ending and Heroic. Okay, so here's the other part of this deck. Heroic Reinforcements. Create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste. This card sucks. This card's awful. Create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, and then everything gets +1/+1 in haste. I don't like it. I don't like this card. I would rather you played some sort of reckless bushwhacker or something in place of this. Okay, well, I mean, I guess this doesn't fit the thing. Like, this doesn't have synergy with a General Furus. Okay, this is partially budget. Okay, I got it. Well then, okay. Okay, let's build the deck assuming this is what you want to do. This is what you want to do. You want to play Heroic Reinforcements. And you want and they get haste, right? Okay, that's not too bad. Going into Furus into that card, giving the 4/4, turning the 4/4 into 5/5 is not too bad. So okay everyone, how do we really abuse this then? Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 1/1 white human creature token. This is fine. Okay, Ragavan has no business in this deck, so just get rid of it. Oh yeah, Tarkus Command. It's cheaper. But they don't get haste. That's the difference. You don't get haste. I mean, you can deal 3 damage to your opponent. That might be equivalent to some form of haste. I like the Dryad Militant because it's a multicolored creature. So I don't like Ragavan. Replace that with Dryad Militant. And also, Dryad Militant is just not too bad of a card in Modern. Wild Cantor. Yeah, I guess this is okay. You could use it as ramp. Breeding Tree Emissary is correct. I can't tell how well this is going to interact in the deck because you have a lot of... maybe it's okay to have this many cards to set up to get a payoff. Voice of Resurgence seems poor for the most part. Perforos Hammer? I have a feeling this is not a creature. Not good enough. Like, that's all... This thing does a lot of things at once. At the very least, it does 4 damage on an empty board. Yeah, well, here's the deal. Like, when you have too many of these cards that you set up, and you have not enough payoffs, then that's where it becomes a problem. So I think you should take out the Ragavan and add a Dryad Militant. Is there something better than Voice of Resurgence that we can play? Temur Ascendancy. What do you do? Creatures you control have haste. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield. That's not bad for this deck, to be honest. It's not bad. If you go Recurric into this... Ah, shit, you don't get the card, though, immediately. It's actually awkward, because if you go Recurric, you cast Temur Ascend... Or how does it trigger? Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, so you cast the enchantment, you get the 4/4, and you don't get the card draw. It does synergize quite well, though. Like, really well. You know what? I would suggest that thing. I would suggest this, actually. I like this card, actually, a lot better than the Heroic Reinforcements. Like, that's it. That's actually a really good combo. I don't know if people have found this. Creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control. You may draw a card. Now I'm wondering, can you combine this with, like, the Rhino deck in any way? Because, like, if you Violent Outburst on turn 3, you can't, like... You can't attack with them till next turn anyway. So if you go Temur Ascendancy into Cascade the following turn, you still attack the same turn, except you draw, like, 2 cards out of it. But that's for another deck. So now the question is there anything... So probably get rid of Wrenn and 6, because it doesn't... Well, I guess you could keep Wrenn and 6, that's fine, but it's a bit awkward. Does anything else have 4 power? See, my only fear is... Okay, we could play a few just because, like, hey, it gives all the creatures haste. Which is good. But it doesn't... the rest of the deck isn't based around this... like trying to draw cards... Because we don't. The only 4 power creatures in this deck is basically the golems that we make off of Journal Furus. Yeah, well, the deal is we get haste, but maybe the haste isn't enough. Okay, hold on. Because the one good thing about Heroic Reinforcements is that you're gonna get the creatures. You get some creatures no matter what. Oh, good God. I totally forgot about Shardless Agent in this deck. Like, we should be running Shardless Agent. It's a 2-for-1 for sure. Okay, so instead of Voice of Resurgence, and probably instead of, like, Wrenn and 6, we should have some Shardless Agents in here. We definitely need Shardless Agent in this deck. I mean, maybe Voice of Resurgence is better than I'm giving it credit for. So, like, we could go, like, -1 Wrenn, minus Lightning Helix. Maybe minus... I don't want to get rid of Prismatic Ending, because we might not have many things to do on 1 mana. Oh, but Shardless Agent and Prismatic Ending are non-bows together. Damn it. Like, I understand the deck. I see the deck. Essentially a Naya Zoo deck with General First Recuric at the helm. Heroic Reinforcements gives all the creatures +1/+1 in haste. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I was thinking Recuric Cascade. And what's the Garda Champion of Light? Flying Trample. Humans you control get +1/+1. Ooh, and we do have quite a few humans. Whenever it attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library and may reveal a human card. This isn't bad, actually. This is pretty badass for this deck. How to make all this work? I guess you could put a few of these in, and you have a lot of humans, right? This is a human. This is a human. This is a human. This is a human. That's actually really good. And it combos with the Ascendancy card. I like this. I like this a lot, and it's a multicolor card. Okay, let's play 3 of those. Okay, let's play 3 of those instead of Heroic Reinforcements. Then we'll take one of these, a Ren and 6, and a Lightning Helix, and play the Teamer Ascendancy. Ooh, Gigantha. Can we play Gigantha in this deck? And the answer is probably. Oh, no, we can't because of Burning Tree Emissary. Can't play. And Burning Tree Emissary is good enough. Can this deck go the Ponza route with Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl, powering out the chunky payoffs? Probably. Probably. I don't know about the Arbor Elf part, but the Utopia Sprawl might be more reliable than Ignoble Hierarch. Okay, what do we have for the sideboard? Engineer Explosives, Alpine Moon, Path Exile. You know, you're making me think now, Mathematic. Do you know what? Let's dump the Ignoble Hierarch and let's add Utopia Sprawl. You are going to need a forest to always put this thing on. And I don't know if you have enough forests in this in this deck. Make it work. You make it work. You get the forests in there. Get that Utopia Sprawl in here. Because your deck more or less starts at 3 mana. I mean, you have a lot of 1 mana, 2 mana stuff, but it really starts at... You really want the forests out first. And if you play Ignoble Hierarch, then it's just going to die, and you're not going to get that turn 2 anything. Yeah, I agree. I like the idea. Okay, we gave you enough food for thought. Rebuild the deck, and let's see it again. Thanks for submitting the list. We've got math. Okay, let's see. What is your list? Delta Moth. Oh, it's Moth. Rattlegrave. Ooh, we have Dragon Rage Channeler, Demilich, Murktide Regent. Very light white splash for Prismatic Ending. Expressive Iteration. 4 Consider, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Thought Scour, 4 Unholy Heat, 4 Manamorphose. Got Mishra's Bauble. 2 Dress Down. What does Demilich say? No, it's just 4/3. Okay. Floodstrand, Hollow Fountain, 2 Island, 4 Scalding Tarn, 2 Spire Bluff Canal, 3 Steam Vents, 2 Alpine Moon, 1 Blossoming Calm, Flame Blitz, Flusterstorm, 2 Path Exile, 2 Stubborn Denial, 1 Void Mirror, 2 Wear and Tear, 3 Leyline of the Void. Actually, this is a pretty clean deck. This is a very, very clean deck. You're at 17 lands, so I sort of understand why you want to have a lot more cantrips, like Consider, Thought Scour, or just 1 mana spells. But it seems like Expressive Iteration probably is a lot better than cards like Consider. Like this is being compared to like Dig Through Time, for crying out loud. Okay, so how many white mana sources do you have? Flooded Strand, Howled Fountain, 6, 10, only 10? You have Manamorphose, so you have 14. Okay, so you have more or less. You may not have Prismatic Ending on turn 1, but you have Prismatic Ending eventually. Where's the blue-white flash? It's too expensive. It's like 3 mana. Faithful Mending. It's way too expensive for this deck. Like, a deck like this is going to set up for the first 2 turns. Oh, it's 2 mana. You gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, and the discard 2. The flashback is 3 mana. Maybe that's a little bit maybe it's a little bit better than Expressive Iteration in this build. Maybe. But I think Expressive Iteration is still better. Like, this is not a bad card, but this is not entirely using the graveyard. Like, we're just using the graveyard to get stuff in there. But that's it. Keep in mind, Faithful Mending is still card disadvantage. You spend a card to draw 2 cards and then dump 2 cards. Does this deck want a Jeskai Triome and 1 more Steam Vents over 2 Hollowed Fountains? Oh, good question. Okay, so how many red sources do we have? Because we definitely want to play Dragon Rage Channeler on turn 1 if we have the option. So 4, 8, 10. You know what? I could almost get behind that. It's really tight on red mana. It's actually really tight on red mana. So I guess the deal is if you don't have the red mana for Dragon Rage Channeler, you probably have blue. You have Consider or Thought Scour in your hand to at least dig for your red mana. Bloodstrand 4. Because there is Manamorphose, but like you really need to play Dragon Rage Channeler on turn 1 if you have that option. Four, 8, 10, 13. It's low. But you still have stuff to do. And you do have Mishra's Bauble. You still have stuff to do. I think the deck is fine. I really think the deck overall is fine. How much does it cost? This spell costs a blue less to cast for each instant. For each instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn. There is a bit of a nombo actually between these two because you I forgot about this. Because if you when you cast Demolish from your graveyard by exiling 4 instant and or sorcery cards. So the problem is you may not have enough of a graveyard for both of them. Which in that case, okay, so if you end up playing and you cannot cast both of these reliably because there's just not enough cards in the graveyard, maybe consider Faithful Mending for your deck. But for the most part, I don't think you need to. I was trying to think, why don't I see both of these in the same deck ever? And the answer is probably because, like, if you got one, then you can't cast the other. How often is Demolish better than Dreadhorde Arcanist? Very often, because this is a clock. Dreadhorde Arcanist attacks for 1 damage, which in Modern is not a lot of damage. It's Fairy Time Reveler, a little too expensive for this deck. You know, when you have a 17 land deck, you're trying to not tap. You're trying to like play multiple things a turn, not play like tap out to play a Planeswalker. You're trying to like tap out for Murktide Regent for like 2 or 3 mana, and hold up like a removal spell or something. Like this is the top end of the curve here. It's a very low land deck. This deck's gonna be surviving off of 1 or 2 lands most of the time. Some pleb says, just read the title, wanted to stop by and say good. Modern is officially the most expensive. Keep all those poor people out, huh? Anyway, I have no real big feedback. I mean, the deck looks good as it is. I would just keep an eye on how often you can cast both of these. So your options are, if these end up being too clunky, the options I mean, of course you could dump one. But, or you just trim on one of them. Maybe trim on 1 Demolish, 1 Murktide. Play with Ragavan or something. Or, you know, try harder to put stuff in the graveyard. But I'm not really that thrilled with this card because your payoff is just, like, these creatures. And I don't know if it's worth the card disadvantage. I mean, I guess you can dump the Demolish because you can cast it from the graveyard. Don't understand the main board dress down? You'd be surprised how well that interacts with the format. Hammer Time. Kills, makes everything lose flying, that's for sure. So no matter what that Ink Moth Nexus is doing, it's not flying anymore. But also kills off all the constructs from Urza Saga. Murktide Regent shuts off, or turns off Dragon Rage Channeler, turns it into a 1/1, so you can block it easily. Against the Blink deck, you can basically turn off Omnath. Maybe not big value in this matchup. Death Shadow again, turn off your... you could turn off Lurrus for a turn from your opponent, and also Dragon Rage Channeler. It's got stuff. It's got stuff. Does Modern Elves need Vial? No. Modern Elves almost never needed Vial. We got replace Demlich with Ragavan or Delver and fix your mana base. I think the mana base is okay. I mean, the only other option is add 1 Steam Vents, and then probably it's perfect. I mean, the other thing you could do, I mean, you might be getting greedy with the white here. Like, this might not be necessary. That's the only other discussion point. Like, you are stretching your mana base thin for this Prismatic Ending, which is, hey, great card. Great card, but, like, you might be making your turn 1 Lightning Bolts more inconsistent when you really need to Lightning Bolt your opponent's Ragavan. So just keep that in mind. Like, is the white really worth the Path to Exile and the Blossoming Calm and the Wear and Tear? I don't really think so, to be honest. I don't mind 1 Hollow Fountain in the deck for maybe Wear and Tear, but for the most part, like, I don't know if you need these cards. Like, you already have Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt. What more interaction do you want on turn 1? But if you can make it work, you can make it work. It's a little clunky, but if it works, it works. Anyway, that's going to be it for Coffee and MTG today. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. If you love Coffee and well, before I jump to anything, if I didn't get to your comments, questions, or deck lists, I know you had tons of them. We do this Monday to Friday, 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. So you always have another shot at becoming part of the conversation. If you love Coffee and MTG, we'd love to support the channel, and you don't do so already, you could always drop a sub at twitch.tv/Nikachu MTG. You can become a patron, and you can hit the join button on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining me today. It's a fantastic morning. Talking about how expensive Modern is. How if you can't face the prices of Modern, you got to play Pioneer. But if you can scrapple the cards together, if you sell your useless Commander stuff that, you know, has no competitive value anyway because you're just playing with your friends and having a beer, and you don't need that Liliana the Veil, people. You got to sell out of your Liliana the Veil before everybody else does. Get the good cards in Modern. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all next time.